Have you ever stopped to think about why you keep looking for answers outside when everything you really need is already within you? It's curious how we spend our entire lives rummaging through books, consulting experts, asking for advice, accumulating techniques and strategies as if completeness were something we could buy, learn, or achieve. And yet, the more we seek, the more distant we feel from what we desire. It's as if we are chasing our own shadow, always one step behind, always almost reaching it but never truly arriving. Alan Watts had a profound insight about this. He said that humanity's greatest problem is not the lack of knowledge, but the inability to see what is already present. You are too blind to see that the answer is not in some distant place, it is not in the future, it is not in another person. It is here, now, within you, patiently waiting for you to stop running away and finally look inside. The truth is that from a very early age, we were taught to distrust ourselves. We were told that we need diplomas to be intelligent, approval to be loved, achievements to have value. And so, little by little, we learned to ignore the inner voice that always knew the way. We replaced intuition with others' opinions, internal wisdom with external knowledge, self-confidence with constant validation, and then we became strangers within ourselves, living as if we were incomplete, as if something essential were missing. But what is missing is not something you can seek. What is missing is the courage to stop searching and start recognizing. Because everything you are looking for is already within you, it always has been, but you are too busy looking outside to notice. Alan Watts used to talk about this voluntary blindness, this refusal to accept that we are already whole. He said, it's as if we were in the ocean looking for water. We are immersed in the very essence we seek, but we cannot see it because we learn to believe it is elsewhere. We have been conditioned to think that happiness is an achievement, that peace is a destination, that wisdom is an accumulation. And so, we remain trapped in an endless cycle of searching, always postponing fullness for when we have more, know more, are more. But fullness is not conditional. It does not depend on external circumstances. It is your fundamental nature, obscured only by the belief that you need to be different from what you are. Think about how many times you caught yourself thinking you would be happy when you got that job, when you found that person, when you achieved that goal, and then you did, and for a moment you felt satisfaction. But soon the restlessness returned, because the happiness you seek cannot be found in external achievements. It is not in any place you can go, in any person you can meet, in any situation you can create. Real happiness, the kind that does not depend on anything, is already within you. But you are too blind to see, too busy chasing illusions, too convinced that the answer is elsewhere. Alan Watts taught that the great deception of the mind is to create problems that do not exist and then spend a lifetime trying to solve them. You invent that you are inadequate and then seek adequacy. You invent that you are incomplete and then seek completeness. You invent that you are unworthy and then seek value. But all of this is just stories you tell yourself. They are not absolute truths. They are narratives constructed over time, conditioning absorbed from the world around you. And the most extraordinary thing is that you can simply let these stories fall away. You don't need to fight against them. You don't need to overcome them. You just need to recognize them for what they are, stories. And then realize that behind them, you have always been whole. You have always been enough. You have always been exactly what you needed to be. The difficulty lies in the fact that the mind does not want to accept this. The mind loves to have projects, goals, things to achieve. It resists the simplicity of truth because if you are already complete, if everything is already within you, then what is left for the mind to do? It loses its purpose, its drama, its importance, and that is why it keeps insisting that you need more time, more effort, more knowledge. But truth does not need time. It is available now, at this very moment. You do not need to prepare for it. You do not need to deserve it. You just need to stop running away from it. When Alan Watts spoke about seeing what is already within you, he was not suggesting that you become someone different. He was pointing to the fact that you never needed to become anything. The search itself is the problem, not the solution. Because while you search, you affirm that you do not have. While you struggle to arrive, you reinforce the idea that you are not there. But the reality is that you never left where you need to be. You have always been whole, you just forgot to notice. And this forgetting is so deep, so rooted, that it now seems impossible to believe in your own completeness. But impossible, it is not. Difficult, perhaps, because it requires you to let go of everything you learned about yourself. It requires you to give up the narrative of the incomplete self, the self that needs to strive, the self that one day will get there. One day will get, and instead recognize that you are already there. You always have been, you always will be. So what are you searching for when you look outside yourself? You are seeking permission to be who you already are. You seek confirmation that it is okay to be yourself. You seek someone to tell you that it is all right, that you are enough, that you can stop punishing yourself. But this permission, this confirmation, no one can give you, because it does not come from outside, it comes from within. And until you find it within yourself, you will continue to search endlessly, always hoping that the next book, the next course, the next relationship will finally give you what you are looking for. But it won't. Not because these things are bad, but because the answer is not in them. It is in you. It always has been, and it will continue to be, patiently waiting for you to finally stop, look within, and see. Before we continue, if this content is making sense to you, please like this video. It helps the channel grow and spread this message to more people. And in the comments, write which city you are watching from. It's always amazing to know that this reflection is reaching people from so many different places. If you are not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe now so you don't miss the upcoming content. The reason you are too blind to see what is already within you has a lot to do with the way you were taught to think. Since childhood, you learned that living is solving problems, that growing is accumulating, that evolving is adding layers of knowledge and experience to who you are. And so, you spent your entire life building an identity, a personality, a set of beliefs and stories about yourself. But Alan Watts reminds us that this identity you carry so carefully is not who you really are. It is just a mask, a role you learned to play so well that you forgot you were acting. Behind this mask lies something much deeper, much vaster, something that cannot be defined, labeled, or understood by the mind. And that is what you truly are. Not the persona, not the character, but the consciousness that observes all of this. And it has always been here within you, silent, unperturbed, complete. But recognizing this requires you to let go of identification with your thoughts, with your emotions, with your personal story. It requires you to stop saying, I am this or I am that, and simply be. Without labels, without definitions, without the need to prove anything. And this is frightening because the mind does not know how to exist without references. It needs fixed points. It needs to know who you are, what you want, where you are going. But truth is fluid. It has no fixed form. It cannot be captured in words. It cannot be reduced to concepts. It can only be experienced, lived, recognized in the silence between thoughts, in the empty space you usually ignore because you are too busy filling every moment with mental noise. Alan Watts spoke a lot about this inability to simply be. He said we live as if we are always arriving, never arrived, always preparing for real life, always postponing fullness for when conditions are perfect. But conditions will never be perfect. There will always be something missing, something to fix, something to improve. And if you condition your peace to these things, you will never find peace, because peace is not something you achieve. It is something you are. You do not need to create peace within you. You just need to remove the obstacles, put in her path. You need to stop resisting what is, stop demanding that life be different from what it is, stop fighting against reality. And then, at the moment you stop fighting, the peace that has always been within you reveals itself naturally. The problem is that we have been trained to believe that we need to fight, that life is a battle that we must constantly strive to deserve our existence. And so, we become addicted to doing, to conquering, to proving. But everything you seek is not in doing, it is in being. And being does not require effort. In fact, being is the opposite of effort. It is relaxation, acceptance, surrender. It is recognizing that you do not need to become anything because you already are everything you need to be. But this does not mean passivity. It means action that flows from fullness, not from lack. It means living from a place of completeness, not from need. And when you live this way, everything changes. Not because the external world has changed, but because your perception has changed. You stop searching and start living. You stop waiting and start appreciating. You stop running away from yourself and start inhabiting your own existence. Alan Watts taught us that the greatest insight is not to add something but to subtract. It is not to learn more, but to unlearn. To unlearn limiting beliefs, conditioned stories, absorbed fears. When you remove all of this, what remains is clarity. And in that clarity, you see that you never needed anything external to be whole. You see that the search was the very prison, that the effort to find was what kept you distant. And then you laugh. You laugh at the irony of having spent so much time searching for what has always been here. You laugh at the absurd simplicity of the truth. You laugh because you finally understand that life is not as complicated as you thought. It is just the mind that complicates. And when the mind quiets, everything becomes obvious. Think of the times you felt genuine peace. It was probably not when you achieved something great, but in simple moments when you were not thinking of anything, when you were just present. Perhaps watching the sunset, listening to music, or simply breathing without hurry. In those moments, you were not seeking anything. You were just being. And in that being, you touched something deep within you, something that does not depend on circumstances, something that is always available. But then, the mind returned, and with it came the problems, the worries, the things you need to resolve. And you forgot again. You forgot that peace is always here, waiting for you to come home. But coming home does not mean changing places. It means changing perspective. It means realizing that you never left. That even when you were lost, you were exactly where you needed to be. That even when you were suffering, something within you remained untouched, observing everything with equanimity. That something is what you truly are. Not the mind that suffers, but the consciousness that observes suffering. Not the emotions that float, but the space in which they appear and disappear. And that space never changes. It is always here, always now, always complete. You just need to stop ignoring it. Stop being so hypnotized by the content of your experience that you forget the context in which everything happens. And that context is you, the true you. Not the persona, not the story, but the pure consciousness that lies behind all of this. Alan Watts often said that we are all playing hide and seek with ourselves. We hide our true nature under layers and layers of conditioning and then spend our lives searching for what we have hidden. But the game only works if we forget that we are playing. And we forget completely. We take it too seriously. We believe too much in the stories. We identify too much with the masks. And then we suffer. We suffer because we believe we are something we are not. We believe we are limited, separate, incomplete, but you are none of that. You are unlimited, connected, whole. You always have been. And when you finally remember, when you finally see what has always been within you, everything makes sense, not intellectually, but experientially. You simply know. And that knowing does not come from outside, it comes from within. Because everything you seek is already inside you. You were just too blind to see. Block 3, 1,000 words. So what prevents you from seeing what is already within you? What keeps this blindness intact, even when everything points to the simplicity of the truth? The answer is simpler than you think, and that is exactly why it goes unnoticed. What prevents you is the very act of preventing. It is the constant search, the incessant attempt to become better, wiser, more awake. It is the effort to achieve something you imagine is in the future, when in fact, it is available now, at this very moment. Alan Watts used to say that the greatest obstacle to awakening is the idea that you need to do something to awaken, that you need to meditate for years, study sacred texts, follow rigorous practices. All of this may have its value, but it can also become just another way to delay direct perception. Because the truth is not hidden in complex practices. It is here, now, obvious, simple, waiting for you to stop searching and simply perceive. Have you ever noticed how moments of greatest clarity appear when you're not trying? When you relax, when you give up, when you stop forcing? Suddenly something opens up. An understanding arises from nowhere, not because you worked hard for it, but because you finally got out of the way. You allowed what was already within you to manifest. This is what happens when you stop being blind. It is not that you gain something new. It is that you remove the obstacles you place in front of what has always been here. And those obstacles are made of beliefs, fears, conditioning, stories you tell about yourself. They have no real substance. They are like clouds passing through the sky. They obscure the sun, but they cannot touch it. And you are the sun, not the clouds. You always have been. You just forgot to look beyond them. Alan Watts often spoke about the illusion of the separate self, this feeling that you are an isolated entity separate from the rest of existence. This is the root of all suffering, the source of all seeking. Because if you believe you are separate, then you need to seek connection. If you believe you are incomplete, then you need to seek completeness. But separation is an illusion. You are not separate from life. You are life. You are not observing existence from the outside. You are existence itself manifesting in this particular form. And when you see this, when you truly understand that there is no separation, everything you were seeking becomes unnecessary. Because you realize that there was never anything missing, you realize that the search was based on a false premise, on a mistaken belief, and then the search ceases. Not because you found what you were looking for, but because you realized you never needed to search. But this realization cannot be forced. You cannot intellectually convince yourself that you are complete. The intellect can understand the idea, but that does not change anything. Real transformation happens when you stop living from the mind and start living from presence. And presence is not something you do. It is something you are when you stop doing. It is what remains when you abandon the constant effort to be someone, to prove something, to get somewhere. It is simply being here now, without agenda, without goal, without need. And in that being, you discover something extraordinary. You discover that you are complete. Not because you added something to yourself, but because you stopped subtracting. You stopped denying your essential nature. You stopped believing in the stories of limitation, and then what has always been within you becomes obvious. Alan Watts said that life is like a finger pointing at the moon. If you keep looking at the finger, you will never see the moon. The teachings, the practices, the philosophies are just fingers pointing. They are not the truth itself. They only point to it. And if you get stuck in the teachings, if you turn them into one more thing to accumulate, to master, you miss the point. The point is to look where the finger points, not at the finger. And where does it point? Inside you, to the source of everything, to the consciousness that is reading these words now, that is processing these concepts, that is existing effortlessly in this moment. This consciousness does not need teachings. It already knows. It has always known. You just need to stop ignoring it. Stop being so identified with thoughts, emotions, stories. Stop living on the surface and dive into the depth of what it really is, and what you truly are cannot be described. It can only be lived. Any description will be a limitation, a reduction. But you can feel, you can experience, you can recognize, and that recognition is not dramatic. It doesn't come with lights and trumpets, it comes with a simple, yes. As if you had forgotten something obvious and suddenly remembered. It is quiet, subtle, but deep, and it changes everything. Because from that moment on, you stop searching. You stop waiting for life to deliver what you need. You realize that you already have it, you always have, and you always will. Because what you need is not external. It is internal. It is the very essence of what you are. And that essence is always present, always available, always complete. So if you are tired of searching, if you are exhausted from trying, if you are frustrated by never arriving, know that there is another way. That there is a way that is not really a way, but a return. A return to simplicity, to presence, to the truth of what you have always been. And this return does not require you to become extraordinary. It only requires that you stop pretending to be ordinary, that you stop diminishing yourself, doubting your own completeness, believing that you need something external to be whole. You don't need to. You never did. And the faster you realize this, the faster life stops being a struggle and becomes a dance. A dance where you are not trying to get anywhere, just dancing for the joy of dancing, living for the joy of living, being for the simple miracle of being. Alan Watts left us a precious gift with his teachings. He reminded us that we don't need to wait for permission to be ourselves, that we don't need to earn our right to exist, that we are already complete, we are already enough, we are already everything we need to be. And everything we seek, all peace, all happiness, all wisdom, is already within us. It always has been. We were just too blind to see, but now you know. And knowing this changes everything. Because you cannot unknow what you have known. You cannot completely forget what you have remembered. Something inside you has shifted. And that shift, no matter how subtle, is the beginning of the end of the search, the beginning of recognition, the beginning of living from the fullness that you have always been. If this video touched something within you, leave your like so that more people can find this message. And don't forget to write in the comments which city you are watching us from. We love to know that this reflection is reaching hearts all over Brazil and the world. If you are not subscribed yet, subscribe now to the channel to continue this journey of self-discovery and awakening. Until the next video.